Hi everyone, I'm Maria McLachlan and I'm banned from Facebook at the moment, as well as permanently banned from Twitter, so if you can share my videos I'd be most grateful. A few people suggested that I respond to someone called Samantha Lux, who I don't think I'd ever heard of before. I took a look at his channel and oh my god, what a load of rubbish. But then Samantha would probably say the same thing about my channel, so fair dues. The video I chose to respond to is one made about a month ago, I think. Another transphobic YouTube ad, Trans Woman Reacts, in which Samantha responds to not an ad as such, but a propaganda video by a group called Alliance Defending Freedom, the ADF, which is an American conservative Christian group. It describes itself as the world's largest legal organization committed to protecting religious freedom, free speech, marriage, and family and parental rights and the sanctity of life. You get the picture. I ended up deciding to pick just two of the topics that Samantha responds to. And then I realized that the second topic, which was sports, really deserved to be a video topic by itself. So I've ended up responding to just the first 3.5 minutes of Samantha's video. The Alliance Defending Freedom video starts with what seems to be reasonable questions about women's spaces. Should a school-age girl or grown woman be forced to give up her privacy in a locker room because a biological man identifying as a woman wants to change there? Should a shelter serving women who have survived rape, sex trafficking and domestic violence be forced to allow biological men to sleep side by side with these women? That illustration of a dormitory appears to be based on a shelter in Anchorage, Alaska, that provides an emergency bed for the night in this room for abused and battered women, some of whom have escaped human trafficking. Staff turned away a trans-identifying man who turned up there late one night, very drunk and demanding a bed for the night. And he turned up again the next day and he was turned away again, so he filed a complaint with the Anchorage Equal Rights Commission, and a prolonged legal battle ensued, which the ADF helped the shelter to win. So, what do you say to that, Samantha?
First of all, the terminology is so obviously trying to frame these questions in a way that makes you think it's like an obvious answer. Like, of course we shouldn't have men in women's locker rooms. Like, of course not.
So, you agree that as a biological male identifying as a woman, there are certain spaces you shouldn't be in? Great.
But if you're familiar with the actual debates, you would know that when they say biological men or even just men, they're actually referring to transgender women.
Otherwise known as men. I mean, what's the issue here? Whatever their political and religious motivations, isn't it a good thing that this group appears to prioritise the feelings of women and girls over those of men in these particular circumstances? I mean, surely as someone who identifies as a woman, you are able to empathise with them.
They're really playing off the assumption that all trans women are predators and all trans women are a threat to cisgender women.
Oh, really? Who said that? Seriously, who has ever said that all trans women are predators, that all trans women are a threat? Nobody. That is a straw man the gender ideologues come up with time and time again. There are literally hundreds of tweets by people accusing others of thinking that all trans people are sexual predators or paedophiles or stuff like that. I can't say for sure whether it is a straw man deliberately created to divert attention away from what we are actually saying, or whether it's merely a symptom of the victim complex that so many trans people evidently have. Here is the example that I posted on the crime page of my website. It was tweeted by Bex Stinson, who at the time was a senior member of staff at Stonewall UK. You may have heard of them. There is a persistent and consistent effort to label trans people as criminals. Bollocks! Listen carefully. There are reasons why women and girls don't want to share certain spaces with men, whatever you might like to call yourselves, and those reasons are to do with our feelings. No, really, we have feelings, and we think our feelings matter even if you don't. It may just be a simple matter of feeling uncomfortable, embarrassed, having to get undressed in front of male persons. But for the survivors of male violence and sexual abuse, and there are a hell of a lot of them, to have to share a changing place, a sleeping space, a showering space with men can be very frightening and traumatizing. They may be the nicest, gentlest men in the world, but how can we know that? This surely isn't hard to understand. I mean, plenty of men do understand and would not want the women and girls in their life put in that situation. But then they're not the men who are lying to themselves.
When in reality, we all know that's not the case. There is literally no data that shows that trans women are a threat.
Excuse me? Literally no data?
Are you fucking joking me?
Apart from Dana Contreras, rapist, Lisa Hoxwell, rapist, Jessica Winfield, child rapist, Kristen Lucas, child rapist, Jessica Brennan, child rapist, Michelle Martinez, child molester, Katie Tolotovsky, child molester. Sexual assault of minors seems to be a popular choice, so maybe I should feel safe. Or maybe not. There are countless reports of violent crimes and sexual crimes carried out by trans-identifying men. I've got a page full of links to some of them from many different countries around the world. There's a whole website dedicated to just UK trans criminals. There is so much information out there that to say there is literally no data is inexcusable and, frankly, creepy and akin to grooming.
However, there is data that actually shows that trans women are often the targets of harassment, often the targets of sexual abuse and assault.
Oh, of course there is. I mean, we never stop hearing about these poor, unfortunate men who choose to present as feminine getting harassed and abused. It's all about the man feels. You can't even mention the possibility that women may be unhappy with men in their spaces without being accused of hate and bigotry and transphobia. Well, guess what? There is also data that women, adult human females, are the targets of harassment, sexual abuse and violence too. Whoever would have guessed? That is why women in the late 20th century fought for women-only refuges. It's now 2021 and we're having to fight for them all over again, thanks to people like you, Samantha, pushing back and trying to reverse our rights. In the UK, 2 to 3 women a week are murdered, compared to fewer than one trans person a year. I'm told the last murder of a trans person in the UK was 3 years ago.
There have been numerous cases of trans women literally dying after being refused shelter at a women's shelter.
But you don't have any examples for us? Any cases to reference? Why's that? I mean, after you said there was literally no data that trans women are a threat, and I showed that to be a falsehood, it's kind of hard to take your claims seriously, and it behoves you to try to back them up. I mean, I'm not saying that it's never happened. I'm not saying that no trans-identifying male has ever been turned away from a women-only shelter only to subsequently get murdered, but I take strong exception to the implication that shelters who stick to their remit of admitting only women are somehow to blame. No man, whatever they identify as, should be trying to get into a women's shelter in the first place. I did have a look myself for any news stories that fitted Samantha's narrative, but I didn't find a single one. I did, however, find a few stories of trans-identifying men behaving abominably in women's shelters, like this one in Vancouver, and this one in Fresno, California, and this one in London, England.
And transgender people actually have the highest risk of being sexually assaulted throughout the entire homeless population.
The entire homeless population of where? The whole world? North America? Might Samantha be one of those Americans who thinks the world is confined within the borders of the United States? This is a classic example of how people misuse data in furtherance of an argument. Firstly, he's quoting one sentence, not even from the original study, but from an article reporting on a study of 2,500 homeless people in one American city, San Francisco. You could have quoted the whole paragraph, Samantha, from which we learn that women also had a significantly elevated risk, with 9.4% reporting being sexually assaulted in the previous year compared to 1.4% of men. Now, it would be interesting to know how many subjects of the study were men, how many were women, and how many were transgender. But for that, I had to go find the original study myself, because neither Samantha nor the article posted in his list of sources had a link to it, which was quite annoying and a bit sketchy, as in, what are you trying to hide exactly? And indeed, there is so much wrong with this study, it's really not worth the candle. So I'll confine myself to pointing out that it dates back to 2003, nearly 2 decades old, a different era. What I find most revealing is what Samantha's treatment of it tells us about Samantha. The original study tells us that of the 2,577 participants, 76% were men, just over 22% were women, and the rest were classified as transgender. That was 42 trans people, but incredibly, it doesn't tell us whether they were male or female. 12% of those 42 trans people claimed to have been sexually assaulted in the space of 12 months. That is 5 people. Of the 575 homeless women, about 55 of them had been sexually assaulted in the same period. 5 trans people versus 55 women. Of course, those 5 trans people might be female, in which case 60 women, no trans-identifying men, were sexually assaulted. Or they could be male, or they could be some of each. The point is that Samantha seems to think that although trans people were a tiny minority back in 2003, I mean, it's probably half of San Francisco now, they're having a marginally higher rate of sexual assault mean they have the greater need of protection than the much larger group of women whose fears of being around male-bodied people who call themselves women don't matter.
So in my opinion, this whole transphobic illusion of a lack of privacy is not as important as protecting people that are actually being victimized in these places.
Nasty, gaslighting, self-serving, misogynist plank. I'm talking to you, Samantha Lux, and every other entitled male who thinks he can be a woman. Fight for your own damn spaces. You don't belong in ours. Now, as I said at the beginning, I'm only 3.5 minutes into a 16-minute video, and since none of Samantha's claims so far stood up to scrutiny, I'm not going to waste my time checking every single one. The dude has zero credibility as far as I'm concerned, but he has inspired me to make a separate video on the subject of transgender athletes. So I've got that on my list for some time, and I'll be back soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.